What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G and the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, be sure to check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 403, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. With the A34 5G, we're getting a slightly larger 6.6-inch 120Hz Super AMOLED display. This phone also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 390, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio as well. So in almost every way, these displays are pretty much the same. Both have Super AMOLEDs, 120Hz refresh rates, 1080p resolutions, and the same exact 19.5:9 aspect ratio. Really, the only difference is that with the A34 5G at 6.6 inches versus 6.4 with the A54 5G, the A34 is a bit larger, which I don't really know why they did this, since I guess the A54 5G is supposed to be slightly higher end, but if you do want a slightly larger display, the A34 5G will have a bit of an advantage, but aside from that, they're pretty much interchangeable. That being said, both displays are really good. They both are decently large, albeit the A54 5G is a bit smaller, but no matter what, I would say either phone is large enough. With 1080p Super AMOLEDs, they definitely have really good image quality, and with 120Hz refresh rates, the movement on the screen is a bit faster and smoother, making them feel a bit more premium. So in general, if you're looking for a phone that has a nice display, either phone here will be a great choice. Now for storage, both phones are getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so there's really no difference here. And also keep in mind, each phone has another variant that has 256GB. Now with the A54 5G, you're probably not going to get that version from a US carrier, and the A34 5G is not even officially launched in the US, so just keep this in mind. But in general, as far as the standard versions go, these phones do have 128, which in my opinion, is really going to be plenty of storage for most people. Sure, if you're really a power user, if you're constantly downloading all kinds of new apps and games and stuff like that, or maybe you have a lot of photos and videos, then you might want to have more storage than this, but again, these phones do have microSD card expansion too, so even in that case, it probably won't be that big a deal. For security features, both phones have Face Unlock, and they both have really nice in-display fingerprint scanners, so definitely nice to get both options. But starting with the A54 5G, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go, so real fast and responsive. And now for the A34. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners worked real well, no issues at all. And again, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. For the camera setups, with the A54 5G, up front, we get a real nice looking hole punch design for the selfie camera. This camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we get a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. For video, this phone has a max recording quality of 4K in both the rear and front cameras, so definitely great to see there. With the A34 5G, up front, we got this kind of water drop notch design for the selfie camera. Not quite as premium looking, but it gets the job done. This camera is 13 megapixels for whatever reason. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 12 megapixel macro camera. And then for video, this phone can also record in 4K in both the rear and front cameras. So again, great to see. So as you can probably tell, as far as features go, these phones are pretty much the same. Both have stuff like an ultra wide camera and a macro camera. So if you want a decent variety of features, then you're not going to go wrong with either phone here. And keep in mind, despite not having depth sensing cameras, both phones can still use portrait mode just fine. It's basically that the sensors in these phones are really good, so it's all built into the main camera, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't make a difference. Although most mid-range phones do typically have depth sensing cameras, if you look at pretty much any high-end device, really none of them do, so that really goes to show the hardware in these camera setups are definitely good. Now, as far as photo quality goes, I'm gonna let you decide this for yourself, because honestly, with these phones, despite some obvious differences in the specs, the actual image quality, in my opinion, is really not significantly different. I mean, some people might notice certain differences and prefer one over the other, but at the end of the day, really they're at the same level. So I personally really wouldn't use the camera as a deciding factor here, because in general, if you're looking for a mid-range phone that has a good camera, the bottom line here is you're really not gonna go wrong with either phone here. But that being said, to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G. So definitely great photo quality. Sure, if you're comparing it to a much higher end device, then Obviously, the higher end device is gonna be quite a bit better, but in general, I feel like for the average person, you really don't need to spend $1,000 on a flagship phone. You can get something like this for half the price or less and still get really good photo quality for something like Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, sending photos to friends and family, and just keeping things for your own memory, no matter what you're doing for the more average daily tasks. I do think the A54 5G will get the job done just fine. And then here's some pictures taken with the A34 5G. And same kind of thing, I do think the photo quality is great for what it is. So overall, if you are looking for a mid-range phone that has a really nice camera, then especially compared to a lot of phones in this price range, I do think either phone will be great here. But again, between the two, I feel like, while there definitely are some differences, I feel like they're really not that significant. So either way, if you're looking for a phone around this level, you're really not going to go wrong with either phone here. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Exynos 1380 processor. With the A34 5G, we're also getting 6GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 1080. Now, overall, between the two, there actually is a pretty slight performance difference, with the A54 5G being a tiny bit faster, but honestly that's really on paper. In my experience, you're really not going to notice that much. But I will say, compared to their predecessors, the A53 5G and the A33 5G, these phones are actually quite a bit faster, and that really goes with comparing these phones to like pretty much any other mid-range phone, because while compared to something a tiny bit higher end, like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE or the Google Pixel 6a, these phones are definitely not that fast compared to something like a Motorola Moto G Power 5G, the OnePlus Nord N25G, or again their own predecessors. These phones are a bit faster, so if you are looking for more of a mid-range phone for more basic activities, but you still want the performance to be a bit faster and smoother, then either phone here will be a great choice. And again, between the two, the A54 5G is slightly faster. Now I did run a benchmark test on each phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see, the A54 5G does have a slight advantage, but really not by much, and for that matter, the A34 5G actually has a slightly better single core score, so at the end of the day, they're really on par with each other, and when you're actually using the phones in real life, I doubt you're really gonna see a significant difference, but again, if you do just technically want the faster phone between the two, you could always get the A54 5G, but both phones here are definitely noticeably faster than average for what they are. Now both phones here have 5000 mAh batteries, and they also support 25W fast charging, so no difference here, but keep in mind, these are really good batteries. So with the 5000 mAh battery, you can expect to get great battery life and longevity. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger and you really need something that's gonna last all day, you're definitely not gonna go wrong here. So in general, if the battery is just more important to you, definitely keep this in mind. And with 25W fast charging, keep in mind to actually use this. You will of course need a 25W fast charger, but if you do have one, the charging speed you get with these phones is really good. For the software, both phones do have Android 13, which is not surprising, considering Samsung has really good software support. And in addition to this, with these phones you can also expect to get several other major updates in the future. They both should be getting Android 14, 15, 16, and 17, so definitely great for if you want to keep a phone for multiple years, but you still want the latest version of Android the whole time. As far as other features go, unfortunately neither phone has a headphone jack, which is really too bad because despite being really nice and kind of premium for what they are, these are still not flagship phones by any means. And while when it comes to something like a Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra or an iPhone or even something like an S21 FE or Google Pixel 6a, which aren't really top of the line flagship phones but still are technically higher end devices, even then I feel like them not having a headphone jack or micro SD card expansion for that matter is really not surprising. But with these phones, despite being nice, they definitely are budget phones, so taking away the headphone jack is definitely disappointing. But unfortunately, I feel like in the future, more and more manufacturers are really going to follow this, so a headphone jack overall is something we're probably just going to have to enjoy while we still can. So if you do have a normal pair of wired headphones you want to use, with these devices, you will need an adapter. But on the bright side, both phones here do have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, keep in mind with these phones, you can do that no problem. Now for the overall designs here, they look pretty much the same, so definitely nice and premium, but keep in mind, the A54 5G does actually have glass on the back, which is definitely a nice premium touch. And in addition to this, it does have a bit more weight to it, and again with the hole punch design for the selfie camera, I feel like this really does make a bit of a difference. So while most people are probably going to be using a case anyway, if you do want a slightly more premium look and feel, the A54 5G will have an advantage, but again, the A34 5G is still really nice too, so you're honestly not going to go wrong either way. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Now honestly, ignoring the price, I feel like these phones are really almost interchangeable. The only real difference is, on one hand, the A34 5G is slightly larger, but on the other hand, the A54 5G, at least in my experience, is a tiny bit faster. But at the end of the day, if you are looking for an affordable 5G phone that has a decent amount of features, a really nice display, great performance, and a good camera setup, then either phone is going to be perfectly fine here. That being said though, the main real deciding factor here is what kind of deal you can get. On one hand, if you're in the US, keep in mind, the A34 5G is not officially launched here, so you're not going to get any kind of carrier deals or anything. But on the other hand, the A54 5G is, and despite it having somewhat of an advantage, I personally haven't seen a ton of good deals on it yet. Now, of course, down the road as it gets more established, I'm sure this definitely is going to change. Eventually, Cricket is probably going to offer it for like $120 something, kind of like what they did with the A53 5G. Now, again, I personally haven't seen it yet, but I know this will eventually happen, and things like this do change from time to time. So if you can get a good carrier deal, then I would definitely go for the A54 5G because, of course, if you can get this phone for a lot cheaper, then it's really just going to be a better choice because, again, there's really not a huge difference between these phones. That being said though, keep in mind, the A34 5G at full price is like $100 less, going for $327, whereas the A54 5G is going for $449. So in that case, if you can't get a deal on the A54 5G, then I would definitely go with the A34 5G. And in addition to this, if you're outside the US, I'm not 100% positive because it really depends on your location, but I'm pretty sure that everywhere outside the US, the A34 5G is just going to be a better deal in general. So at the end of the day, despite some really minor advantages each phone has over the other, I would pretty much just get whichever one you can get for less. But again, in general, if you are looking for an affordable 5G phone that really provides a lot of value for the money, either phone here will be a great choice. Now, once again, if you do want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalibas Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.